It's Unitarian. We know.
We don't have the words need to be put up. Should we wait until? Oh yeah, I'll just see it through. Sorry. Yes, okay. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Back to the top. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Last time. Where do we come from? Where are we going? You guys are beautiful.
Go ahead.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder. My name is Diana Maiden, and I serve as the worship leader for this Sunday's service. One thing I love about this congregation is how so many of our interest groups, from defending democracy to teepee raisers to racial justice and many others, participate within our larger community, state and country, as allies to social justice work. This not only supports justice work on a larger scale, but as is an antidote to personal despair and isolation. If you are joining us online, please fill out a visitor form in the link in the description. We'd love to connect with you. To give you all some idea of what we are about, let me tell you about our mission. We say here that we connect bravely, deepen spiritually, embody justice, and always love. What we mean is that this community is inviting you into our shared time together today, but it's also inviting you into a way of life, a way of being in the world that may transform you. We want to grow as individuals and to welcome more people into this community. And we want to help you in your personal dream to make the world and your life better. Each week, when we gather, we light our chalice, just as 1,000 other congregations do around the country. It's a symbol of our Unitarian past and future. It's a visible reminder of the interconnection that we hold. We are not bound together by creed, a specific list of things we all believe exactly the same way. We are united instead by shared values expressed in our 7 principles and by the commitments we make to each other that creates this community. Will you join in saying our mission together as we light the chalice this morning? We gather in fellowship to connect bravely, deepen spiritually, embody justice, and always love.
Rainy days are good days for imagining. You imagine with me for a minute? I have a story, but the story takes a little bit of imagining. This by Oliver Jeffers. It's called What We'll Build. And if you'd like, close your eyes and imagine these things that he suggests we should build. Some of these things he suggests, some of them are real concrete. They're easy to imagine. Imagine a door. You can imagine a door. Some of them are a little harder to imagine, a little more abstract. Imagine making room for love. Here we go. What we'll build. What shall we build? You and I. Let's gather our tools for a start, for putting together and taking apart. Let's build a door where there was none. We'll build a house to be our home. I'll build your future and you'll build mine. We'll build a watch to keep our time. We'll build some love to set aside and build a hole where we can hide. A fortress to keep our enemies out and higher walls for when they shout. But you don't always lose. You don't always win, so we'll build a gate to let them in. We'll build a table to drink our tea and say, I'm sorry, me too, me three. We'll build a tower to watch the sky and other worlds that pass us by. Let's build a tunnel to anywhere. Let's build a road up to the moon. Let's build a comfy place to rest, for we'll be tired soon. Let's build a boat that can't be broken, that will not sink or be cracked open. A place to stay when all is lost, to keep the things we love the most. We'll put these favorite things beside the earlier love we've set aside. I think that we may want them later, when times are hard, when needs are greater. But first things first, let's build a fire. For we've planned a lot and now we're tired. It'll keep us warm, like when we're born. And then we'll say goodnight, as all's all right. These are the things we'll build, you and I. And this is the thing, every one of us in this room and online, every one of us, the youngest young person and the oldest elder, every one of us are builders. Every one of us can create. Every one of us can build a wall, sure, but every one of us can build a door in that wall. Every one of us can build a place to stay for each other when all's lost. Every one of us can remember the things that we love the most and share them with each other. And whether you like stories in rhyme or not, it gives you something to think about a lot. We are builders. Let's sing together as in a moment our kids join Rachel in heading off to class.
This rose will open. I know this rose will open. And Austin will play the melody one time through, and then we'll sing it twice through.
Take a breath with me. Down near the bottom of the crossed out list of things you have to do today, between green thread and broccoli, you find that you've penciled sunlight. This is the poet Tony Hoagland writing the word. Down near the bottom of the crossed out list of things you have to do today, between green thread and broccoli, you find that you have penciled sunlight. Resting on the page, the word is beautiful. It touches you. As if you had a friend and sunlight were present. They'd sent from someplace distant as this morning to cheer you up and to remind you that among your duties, pleasure is a thing that also needs accomplishing. Do you remember that time and light are kinds of love? And love is no less practical than a coffee grinder or a safe spare tire. Tomorrow, you may be utterly without a clue, but today you get a telegram from the heart in exile proclaiming that the kingdom still exists, the king and queen alive, still speaking to their children, to anyone among them who can find the time to sit out in the sun and listen. Join me in a spirit of prayer, of meditation. Maybe close your eyes and find a quiet way for your body to rest. Spirit of life and love, whatever name you give to that love that we move inside of, that moves between us, our hope and prayer this morning, our intention and practice is to remember sunlight, not just because it's a gray day, but for all of the gray times when the world around us is bright and sunny. Our hope, our prayer, our intention is not to let go of the good, of the beautiful, not to forget that pleasure is a practical part of our lives, that love is as practical as a spare tire. And in the silence of this house and in our singing, in our words, and in the glance or the hug or the handshake that connects any two of us together, we remember that love. We find our way back to that door inside of ourselves, which, when we open it, is bigger on the inside than the out. Finding our way back to ourselves. that, like a rose that opens in its own time. We practice finding that feeling this morning in order that we know where it is in the days and the weeks ahead. So that when the news of the world, when the despair of our own lives emerges again, when it bursts one of our tires, we know where to find the spare. We know how to unloose the bolts that keep love locked down in our heart and put it back on and maybe drive through our life a little more tenderly, a little more gingerly. But without stopping. That's our hope this morning, and our prayer and our intention. To pack love away, to remember where we've packed it, to remember how to find it for all the days that we need to rediscover it. Be together in silence for a few moments. Amen. Our stones ritual, any ritual that we do, is this outward expression, this embodied expression, a physical expression of something that's happening invisibly on the inside. And in moving our bodies, in placing stones to symbolize our joys and our sorrows, we're reshaping ourselves like a river, like water moving over rock. And from one day to the next, you don't see any difference in that stone. And then slowly, eventually, the rough edges wear away and new channels get carved. I think that ritual and spiritual practice is like that sometimes. Bit by bit, I don't know that I see radically different change from one moment to the next. But over time, we teach ourselves, we train ourselves in this work to recognize how hope and tragedy are woven together in living, how beauty and despair, how loss and new beginnings, all of these are happening all the time, all at once. And we teach ourselves how to become people who can notice and hold all of that at once. So in a moment, as the music begins, for us here in person, I'll invite you to come forward, starting with the back half of the room and then the sides and the front. And silently to take a stone and feel the weight of it, and let it be a token of your thankfulness or your worry, your hope, your fear, all of it. And then place it in the sacred earth in the company of all the joys and sorrows of this community. This morning, the Hurley family lifts up with joy Toby's 17th birthday. Our dog has been part of our youngest son's life for over half his years. Happy birthday, Toby. Please come forward as you feel moved. We hold this compassionate space with love for all the blessings and all the concerns we carry. in this week marked by political violence and school violence closer to home, I'm reminded of a first century rabbi who was asked to summarize the whole of the Torah while standing on one foot. And he said, "Love your neighbor as yourself. All of the rest is commentary." When challenged to describe all of Unitarian Universalism while standing on one foot, Christine Robinson, who was then the minister at the congregation in Albuquerque, said, we have a Protestant history, an agnostic theology, and a democratic governance. Which is a little less catchy than love your neighbor as yourself. I think that's in there somewhere too. Our roots are in the most radical wing of the Protestant Reformation. So radical that many of us, maybe most of us, are not Christian. And our agnostic theology is not the boogeyman of, moral relativism. Instead, a much more grounded acknowledgement that none of us has the whole truth. None of us knows all of it. But I'm struck this week by the line that she draws between that agnostic theology and democratic governance. Because none of us has the whole truth, we are wary of leaders, political or religious, who claim to have the whole truth and the one right way of doing things. Because none of us have the whole truth, democracy seems to be the only way to bring in as many voices, as many perspectives, as many opinions as possible. Because we don't have the whole truth, we need a system of governance that makes change possible over time within the congregation, but also at the level of local and national politics. Our agnosticism, this sense that none of us have the whole story, goes hand in hand with our pluralism, this commitment to shared values but different opinions, the sense that we may agree on love. We may, in fact, agree that love your neighbor as yourself is the essence of the Torah, of the Gospels too, for that matter. And we may have very different theologies that brought us to that place. That agnosticism goes hand in hand with pluralism. And for pluralists, it's not just a theological position, but it's a way of moving through the world that extends to our public life as well. The sense that government exists to secure and protect the rights of all people. And then within that framework, there will be deep disagreements about what it means to lead a good life, or what our obligation is to care for our neighbor. There will be disagreements about what justice means, what fairness means, how to go about ensuring them, disagreement about where my rights end and yours begin. For pluralists, there's a core set of values: freedom, reason, and tolerance, empathy, compassion, care for the public good, curiosity, dialogue, the continual unfolding of knowledge. This core set of values, which is true in our religious life, but I think also in our public life. And then disagreement about exactly how do we go about living those things out. Pluralism, in that sense, in public life, just like our theology, is progressive. We hope that we will know more tomorrow, that we'll experience more tomorrow, understand another's experience better tomorrow. There's this hope that our minds will change, that new knowledge and experience and understanding will shape the way we see and understand the world. And in that, we hold a sense of complexity, the sense both of a commitment to our values, the best that we know them, and to the fact that as our knowledge and experience grows over time, the way we express those is going to be different. And that's true for ourselves now. It's true also as we look back at history. Jefferson declares the universal equality of man and is unable to imagine it actually applied to the enslaved human beings that he brutalizes. And we look back and hold the tangled fact of both of those realities. And imagine, in that progressive, unfolding sort of way, that he wouldn't do the same if he was born today. This sort of an evolutionary approach to moving through life, changing our mind with new information, predates the theory of evolution. This way of doing life, of doing faith, was birthed in the Enlightenment in the 1700s. And it shaped the lives and the thought of our country's founding fathers. It got codified in the Constitution. It shaped the roots of our religious tradition, too, which, like our political system, refused and refuses to grant any one person a monopoly on truth. Giving voice to this style of living, this way of living, this thread to follow, the Unitarian William Ellery Channing writes in 1837 that the great end in religious instruction is not to stamp our minds upon the young, but to stir up their own. Not to make them see with our eyes, but to look inquiringly and steadily with their own. Not to give them a definite amount of knowledge, but inspire a love of truth. Not to bind them by ineradicable prejudices to our particular sect or peculiar notions, but to prepare them for impartial, conscientious judging of whatever subjects may be offered to their decision. This is what Rachel and our teachers do with our kids every week. This is what we all do together every week. For pluralists, life is an act of discovery and creation. And from our core set of shared values arise endless ways to live a good life, good in a moral sense, but also good in the sense of flourishing, meaningful. And we refuse to be fooled that there's only one right answer. The goal then, or the kind of community then that we make, the goal isn't to be surrounded only by like-minded people, but to be surrounded by like-hearted people. It's a phrase from Alan Jacobs, a scholar at Baylor University. And Jacobs, humanities professor that he wants to help us cultivate better thinking, which is just the sort of thing you would expect a professor of the humanities to say. The sort of deep thinking that lets you wonder and consider and change your mind. And to do that sort of living, he says, to do that sort of thinking, requires surrounding yourself with like-hearted people. He says, you know what it's like to be around people who share your core convictions, and yet you can't stand to be around them. In one sense, they're your in-group, and in another sense, it's like, when can I leave this party? And it closes you off to spend all your time around people who may be like-minded, but whose spirit is unhealthy. They're not fun people to be around. He says, when I was deciding who do I want to be talking with on social media, I realized it wasn't necessarily the people who agreed with me about all my religious and political beliefs. What I wanted was people who were generous and kind and caring and thoughtful, so that when I said something, they would think about it rather than just react. So that when I'm with them, I feel good about being in their presence. And I don't always feel good about being in the presence of people who might, if you made a list of 100 core beliefs, they might line up more, but they're just not people I want to spend time with. The scholar of religion, Martin Marty, wrote once that the dividing line in American religion is not really, at least the practical one, the one that he cared about, between conservatives and liberal churches, but between kind and unkind churches. I would rather, he said, go to a kind church whose theology I do not believe than an unkind church whose theology I agree with entirely. This is the community you're building, I think, a community of like-hearted and not always like-minded people. And that kind of living, in fact, is attractive enough that we're going to have to expand the building to fit everyone who wants to do this sort of life. Telling that story this morning, what we'll build, I was reminded, I came to Colorado, I came to this community because I wanted to build, and so did you. And I don't just mean the physical building, that's a side effect of the community building project, building a shared future together, a community of the like-hearted where every one of us is builder. And that it takes courage to build our way into that unknown and unknowable future instead of retreating to the past. The writer Anne Applebaum talks about nostalgia, talks about this daydreaming of the past in two different ways. And the first is reflective nostalgia. The nostalgia you have maybe in the quiet moments when you miss and dream and think about the past. She says that the reflective nostalgic might study the past or mourn the past, but they don't really want to go back again. Perhaps, she writes, this is because deep down they know the old homestead is in ruins, or because it's gentrified beyond recognition, or because they quietly recognize they wouldn't like it much now anyway. I've heard this from some of you who have told me about growing up in small towns here or elsewhere, which you miss and do not want to go back to. Maybe, sometimes I remember this sort of golden light of childhood, like tinted in a movie with a filter over the lens, or the adventures of adolescence. But you're not fooled by that sort of longing, not for long, because as much as that feeling is maybe alive in you, I know it is in me sometimes, you know it isn't that simple. Applebaum says, once upon a time, life might have been sweeter or simpler, but it was also more dangerous or more boring or perhaps radically more unjust. So Applebaum, she contrasts this sort of wistful nostalgia with a different kind that she calls restorative nostalgia. The intention to restore an imagined past as our future. The restorative nostalgist in America today looks back at a time when women married early and had many children and followed their husband's directions and could not leave their husband, when the family studied the Bible each week and did as their pastor instructed and everything was well. This is where you hear the loudest voices of restorative nostalgia, going back to an imagined past in the hopes of making it our future. Applebaum says often the restorative nostalgic is fooled by their own story. Many of them don't recognize their own fictions about the past for what they are. They're not interested in a nuanced past, in a world where great leaders were flawed men, Jefferson, in which famous military victories had lethal side effects. They don't hold the complexity. They don't acknowledge that the past may have had its drawbacks. They want a cartoon version of history. And more importantly, they want to live in it right now. They don't want to act out roles from the past because it amuses them. They want to behave as they think their ancestors did, without irony. The mythic past is simple. It's not really about all the tangled reality of the thing. The mythic past is actually about a set of feelings we have in the present. The feeling, for someone who advocates that sort of restorative nostalgia, that we know how it is all supposed to be. We are the right ones, the pure ones. We today are the ones who stand for character and loyalty and leadership and godliness, just like them. The restorative nostalgic wants to make a mythical past real in the present. And the loudest voices who advocate this sort of thing call back to a mythic past where the great, appropriate, dominant group ruled over all the other, where men were in charge of women, and white folks were in charge of people of color, and straight folks were in charge of anyone who wasn't. That sort of mythic past is actually not history at all. It's supremacy. It's a story about the natural hierarchy of how things are supposed to be. Once the right people were in charge, now they're not anymore, but we'll go back to that again. It's the starting point around the world, too, for fascisms. One commentator notes that fascist politics make room for the study of myth as fact. And in that ideology, the function of the education system is to glorify the mythic past, to elevate the achievements of the members, the right members of the nation, and to obscure the perspectives, the histories of the people who don't belong. The Smithsonian is being forced to review its language about how bad slavery was. The National Park Service website on the Stonewall Uprising has removed any mention of transgender people. Florida has banned teachers from talking about the reality, the fact of sexual orientation and gender identity. To the worldview that embraces this mythic past, the reality of diverse experience isn't true. There is a natural order to things, not as conspiracy or political project, but from a belief that that's really the way it is. I'm holding that this week because that's not a perspective I hear very much in the circles in which I travel. This return to the past where women are subservient to men, where we are an exclusively Christian nation, this is not what I overhear like in the coffee shop from the person sitting next to me. Though it is a perspective that is alive and well and active in Boulder, in this county, and certainly farther afield, but I've heard it more this week in the aftermath of this profoundly disturbing political violence. A call that says this restorative nostalgia is a legitimate and appropriate, a patriotic sort of thing to be engaging in. Applebaum writes, "It's not by accident that restorative nostalgia often goes hand in hand with conspiracy theories, with the medium-sized lie, not the big lie, the medium-sized lie. They offer an explanation. The nation is no longer great because someone has attacked us, undermined us, sapped our strength. Someone, the immigrants, the foreigners, the elites, someone has perverted the course of history, has reduced the nation to a shadow of its former self. And the essential identity, the meaning-giving identity that we once had has been taken away, has been replaced with something cheap and artificial. We now have fallen. We need to return." It's a worldview, a story, a belief to which people belong, Once upon a time, things were as they should be, with the right people on top. And once that's become the belief, once you already know that you're right, once you have all of those answers, there's no actual debate that unfolds after that. It's just a matter of explaining to others why you're right. Don't be fooled by that. I try not to chase politics when I preach. It would be easy, but it would be a thin soup to give you every single Sunday a roundup of why things are bad forever. And besides, it's easy to use words to get people angry, to unite us against them, to preach against the fallen present and invent our own mythic past. But I don't think that's why you're here. I think you're looking for a community of the like-hearted. I meant to preach on wonder this week, and some of you may be wondering when I'll get to that. There, I did it. I don't think that counts. To preach on wonder, how across our different theologies and our different understandings of the universe, we all feel the shared human experience of wonder, of awe, of encounter with mystery, and we may call it by different names. We may explain it with different sorts of stories, but it unites us within our diversity, within our pluralism. Well, you make a plan, and then the events of the world intervene. Political violence, school violence, and it feels suddenly, hearing those voices louder, lifting up an imagined past, it feels more urgent to say, don't be fooled. Don't be fooled by two simple stories. Wonder about the complexity. Don't be fooled by people who have the answer for you, who offer you the one thread that if you just pull it will untangle the knot of the world. Don't be fooled, because none of us has the whole truth. And we are wary of leaders, political or religious, who claim to have the whole truth and the one right way to do things. Wonder instead, what will we build? It's easy to tear down. It's hard to build. What shall we build, you and I, says Oliver Jeffers. Let's gather all our tools for a start, for putting together and taking apart. Let's build a door where there was none. Let's build a house to be our home. I'll build your future. You build mine. These are the things we'll build, you and I. And now we go to work. Amen. Friends, will you rise in body or spirit? The hymn is number 298. Wake now my senses.
So this hymn speaks to me because I grew up in a Presbyterian church in Texas, and we sang this song a lot. But the words in the Christian tradition, at least the words that I'm familiar with, were, "Be thou, be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart." And when I came to this church and sang this song for the first time, I really appreciated how the words were rewritten. And this hymn is a great integration of what Reverend David was speaking of. So I invite you to sense into your body, your soul, your mind as you sing, "Wake now my senses, wake now my reason, wake now my compassion, wake now my conscience, and wake now my vision again." So there's 5 verses, but just sink into those feelings in these difficult times.
This month, we are splitting our offering with Teepee Raisers, an organization which strives to alleviate conditions of poverty, honor Indigenous wisdom, reconcile our shared history with the peoples of First Nations, and empower youth with the leadership skills needed to effect social change in their communities. The shared goal ultimately focuses on reconciling the difficult history of Indigenous people and the United States government, believing in the healing power of relationships. Meaningful relationships are the key to transformative justice work. Since 2019, about 60 folks from UUCB have joined service and learning and relationship building trips to the Pine Ridge Reservation, Hopi, and Navajo reservations. I invite you to give as generously as you are able. For those online, you can use the QR code or find a link in the video description. For those of you gathered in person, you can scan the code or make a donation as the ushers now pass the baskets. May our gifts be used to enact justice, bringing peace and love to the Boulder community. I just received a message that the QR code is not working. I'm sorry. I can't change that right now. But what I can do is present you with some closing words and a few invitations that I think you are all welcome to participate in. I have three. The first is the newly formed UUCB Defending Democracy team hosts the first half of 1 Million Rising Resistance Gathering this coming Tuesday, the 16th, at 6:30 in the Sky Room at UUCB. Please come and join for a lively discussion of addressing the threats to American democracy and how to take action as individuals and as a community. Find a table with information this morning in the coffee hour to pre-register. That gives us some idea of how many folks might be coming. The second invitation is that following the service today, please grab your coffee and come back here in the Earth Room at 12:15 to meet with this year's delegates to the annual Unitarian Universalist General Assembly, which was held this year in June in Baltimore. They'll share their experiences and the highlights of their week and give you a sense of what it's like to attend General Assembly and be in the midst of thousands of Unitarians. Finally, this quite an experience. And then finally this evening at 6:30 at UUCB, we are gathering to remember the local poet, Andrea Gibson, to read their poetry aloud and to eat fresh, homemade peach and apple pie together. I'll give them, Andrea, the last word this morning as our closing words. Everybody loves butterflies, but I trust the caterpillars more. I trust the ones who know they aren't done. Will you rise in body and spirit as we sing our close?
I have something to say about this one too. This sermon and service has just really touched me. And I realize now that I'm up here leading songs and that there's a lot of intention that goes into choosing these songs, I think. I'm just really feeling like, wow. So this song, There Is a Love, Rev David talked about all these various things that seem so important about not being right and being curious and those kinds of things, but at the center of all of that is just come back to love. So that's what we'll be singing.